So I opened up the comments in my last video telling everyone to jump in the comments, leave me some kind of like feedback on videos that they'd like to see or questions that they'd like me to answer. And I'm really grateful for everyone who did, got some really, really cool suggestions in there. What I want to focus on today is this question from Alex. And Alex wants some suggestions for some creative sports photography beyond the frozen action shots. It was Alex's comment that stood out to me because really what I'm known for is that more kind of creative shot as opposed to just standard frozen images. So what I wanted to do is take you through some of my top tips of how I do that. It's not particularly very difficult stuff. It just involves you thinking and kind of looking for your images in a slightly different way. So let's dive in. Tip number 1, zooming in and zooming out. Oftentimes what we do when we're shooting sports is we try and work the frame of our image to be the whole body. So that's kind of like feet with a nice gap at the bottom, head with a nice gap at the top, and we freeze the action regardless of what that is. One way to get a bit more creative is to either, from your position, zoom in as tight as you can possibly get so that you get a chest to head shot or a half body shot, and then you're capturing more of an emotion and what's going on, or you zoom way out and you take on a much bigger scene, like a wider kind of landscape shot with action happening in the front of you. This is a great way to kind of like mix in some creativity into your work rather than just kind of like cropping in tight onto a subject, keeping their body full in focus and in frame, and having a standard frozen action shot. Tip number 2, change your perspective. So it's really easy for us to stand on the sidelines of the event we're shooting and to be stood at height level and just firing off lots of images as stuff's happening in front of us. And actually, to be a bit more creative, all you need to do is either kneel down or lay down, and then you get a slightly different perspective, and actually you make athletes look a heck of a lot more impressive. Or go up and shoot down onto the action and down onto the kind of people that are doing stuff in front of you, and you'll get a totally different creative kind of image. And it's just about being in a different place. It's not about a bigger lens or a different camera. It's just about being below the action or above the action. Tip number 3, rule of thirds. So we all know about rule of thirds and the fact that an image can have like a grid overlay to it, and compositions have these grid overlays. And if you imagine it being blocked out into a 9 grid rectangle, if you imagine it to be a 9 grid rectangle, so you've got 3 boxes at the top, 3 in the middle, 3 at the bottom. If you look to place your subject, regardless of whether that's a full body player or kind of like a detail shot or something like that, if you place it onto the intersecting lines, you'll get a much more pleasing composition. To take it even further from the extreme, rather than just placing all of your action and all of your subjects right in the middle column, regardless of whether that's kind of like through the row or down the column in the middle, place the head of the subject in the kind of top left or top right, or even middle left and middle right, and kind of like really leave large portions of that image as negative open space. It really helps to unlock the creativity. It really helps to create a slightly different image that looks a lot more creative and a lot cooler. Tip number 4, play with shutter speeds. So we've talked more than enough times on this channel already, and I will dip into more of it as we go. The act of like slowing that shutter speed down and getting more kind of like motion and action into the image, as opposed to just freezing everything. By panning with a subject and moving with a subject with a slow shutter speed, you get a really good sense of motion and flow. Whereas if you stand still and you slow the shutter speed down, you still get that motion, but it just kind of looks a bit different. They're really good ways of creating some creativity into your work. It doesn't involve you getting expensive gear or anything like that. Just slow your shutter speed right down and then play with the action, whether it's following the action as it goes or just letting the action appear in front of you and blur in front of you as it goes. Tip number 5, look for things, whether that's light or emotion or kind of non-action elements. A really good way to become more creative in your sports photography is to look for moments, okay? So you're not just trying to freeze the action, you're looking at the reaction of that player or that athlete afterwards, whether that's one of happiness or surprise or defeat, it doesn't matter. Look for that emotion after the action rather than just trying to freeze that action itself. Another good thing to do is to look for little like pockets of light. Where's their sunlight? Where's their shadow? Where can you kind of like maximize the difference and the contrast between the two to get something slightly different? What I tend to find is that if I am in quite a bright sunny environment, if I dial my exposure down, I come down maybe 2-3 stops, I can really darken that shadow area and still maintain like a really good exposure on the subject, and it makes it really dynamic. It's another way to get cool creative shots. The other final way really for looking at different things is to actually look at non-action details. So does that athlete have a tattoo? Does that athlete have a particularly cool emblem on their shirt? Is there some kind of like non-person subject that you can take a photograph of that becomes a little bit more creative? Is it a water bottle? Is it a football? Is it a netball? Is it a stick? Is it a bat? Is it a club? Like, what is it? It doesn't just need to be the action as it's happening. One good way to kind of like tie that in is, rather than say it's a golf swing, rather than having a golfer swinging through and you capture the action as a whole, so you've got the whole golfer plus the club, all that kind of stuff. Wait until the action's gone through and the club's all the way above their head, and then just take a picture of the club head at the top of the swing or the bottom of the swing. So you're getting that non kind of like action detail, but it's really different and really creative. There you have it, my 5 top tips for more creative sports photography that's aside from those kind of frozen action shots. And there's definitely a place in sports photography for those frozen still shots. They're brilliant for commercial kind of editorial work. They're really good in magazines and in newspapers, and if it's a really good piece of action, it's a great image. So don't kind of shy away from those. But if you want to add more creativity in, it's just about thinking a little bit differently, placing yourself in slightly different places and looking for slightly different images. During the COVID-19 pandemic, and because my work's been really quiet, what I've actually done is I've worked on quite a lot of resources for sports photographers just like you and me, to help you get better photos, do better business, all that kind of stuff. And you'll have seen my Udemy course ticking along, and I'll have dropped it in for like little adverts and stuff in the videos, so you'll be aware of that. What I've also got is some presets which are available for sale, and what I've just completed in the last couple of weeks is a totally free, you don't have to pay for it, ebook, which is basically improving your sports photography. It's designed to take that person who is a beginner, sort of entry-level amateur who wants to just push their stuff on just a little bit. And you can actually go to the link in the description below, which is on my website. I've got a For Photographers section on my website now, where you can go and you can get all those kind of resources, whether it's a link out to the Udemy course, whether it's stuff for my filters, or whether it's the new ebook that I've just released that's for free, Better Sports Photography. There's going to be more like ebooks and stuff that drop onto there, so it's definitely a link that's worth looking at. If you haven't already, take a moment to hit like on this video and subscribe to my channel. That way you'll get notified every time I post up a new video. You can also check out my work over on Instagram. I'm at BenSnapStuff. Till next time.